came to Dublin Tech Summit, this was the talk and the stage I wanted to be on, because they said this is the stage where the entrepreneurs hang out. And I'm like, they're my people. I got to do this. So I'm going to give you a few tips and secrets about any success that I've had as an entrepreneur. Something you may not have known is that Siri means secret in Swahili. True story, among other things. So I started my journey as an entrepreneur in my 40s, and when I look at this picture of myself, in my eyes, I feel stuck. I can see frustration and just stuck. That's how I was felt. And the question I was asking myself is, I'm just one person. What can one person do that will leave a mark in this world? And it seemed impossible. I had no business degree, no experience, didn't go to conferences or anything. I didn't know what I was doing. But here is the #1 tool that I've used to achieve all of the success that I've been able to have in my life. Everything I'm proud of in my life works like this. I call it a verbally stated goal, a VSG. So the way I see it, life is short. It's like a book. We're here by some miracle, and our purpose, our job, is to make the most of this time we have on this planet. So how do you do that? It's a very personal question. So what you do is, if you're in a good place, if you're like killing it, ride it out. Love that moment. Squeeze the juice on that moment, because it will change. You will be a different person at different times in your life. You will come to what I call a chapter change moment, when maybe you lost your job, maybe you graduated from school, maybe whatever it is, you just got married. Something has changed. So what do you do at these chapter change moments? The first thing is, people often fear change. I embrace it and say, it's time to change. I could change into anything. What will my next chapter be? So how do I do it? What I do is I try to cut out all of the things society is telling me to do. My parents, my friends, society, culture. And I say, what is core? What is the truth that I am feeling right now? And then once I have that feeling, I turn it into words and make that my goal. I literally try to find the words that capture the emotion that is really driving me at that moment. And then here's the V part, the verbally stated part. You have to tell everyone you meet, this is what I'm going to do. Even if you have no idea how you're going to do it. You put it out into the world. So let me give you an example. 2006, I was leading the largest AI project in US government-funded history, $250 million project. But there were politics involved. I was feeling two things. I was feeling stifled, like I had all these ideas I wanted to get out there. I could not make that work at my job. And the second thing is, I felt like what we were doing, when the project's over, it would just end. No good would come out of it. We'd have 650 publications in academia, but so what? I wanted to impact users. So I made my verbally stated goal for 2007. And if you met me at this time, you'd say, hey, Adam, how's it going? What you doing? I'd say, I'm working on 5 projects that can impact users in 2007. And they'd be like, okay, great. I'll follow up on that. We'll see how it goes for you. I didn't have 5 ideas, but it captured the emotion. I was stifled. I wanted to explode with creativity. and I wanted to do things that were important. And my 2008 goal, 1 major, 1 minor. So after I've built prototypes and I could show them to people and put them in front of people and learn from their reactions, I would take the best 2 and start them as companies, 1 major, 1 minor. So my day job was this little startup called Siri. We created a free app in the App Store, and you could just download this app, talk to it, and it would do things for you. You could schedule a cab to show up before Uber existed. You could say, get me a reservation at the French restaurant down the road for 4 people tomorrow night, let's say 7:30. And it would say, here's the reservation. Well, when you could download that app, there was this guy named Steve. This is Steve Wozniak, co-founder of Apple. He downloaded it, and he still talks about this app today. And as a founder, an entrepreneur, I'm so proud of that. He says, if you ask him, what's the greatest app you've ever used? He talks about Siri, not the Siri in our phone today, the original app. It could do so much more, he says. And that just, we put so much love and thought and passion and argumentation into that product. I'm so proud of it. But it turns out he was not the only Steve who downloaded it. One day, at our office, the phone rings, our iPhone, and you know how back then you would try to answer, you'd have to swipe to answer, but it wouldn't always pick up, and we're like, it says Apple, Cupertino. We're like, swipe, swipe, come on, answer, answer. 7 swipes later, and we hear a voice. Hey, it's Steve. What you doing? Want to come over to my house tomorrow? And we're like, Steve Jobs is calling us? You launch an app in the App Store, one of 2 million apps, and the CEO calls you himself? Like, where does he find the time? So he invited us over and said, I'd like to buy your company. We said, wow, we're flattered. We love Apple. Thank you. Not interested. Goodbye. True story. And we left. But Steve is nothing if not persistent. So he convinced us he understood our vision, he would support it, and we decided to join Apple. Now, if you think about the Siri story, it seems like the entrepreneur's dream. Launch a free app in the App Store. 2 months later, you're working for Apple. Like, so easy. But just a little comment, something people don't think about, that 2.5 months that it took to sell to Apple, well, it wasn't the start of the story. In fact, that overnight success took 17 years. My first version of Siri is literally 30 years ago today, within a week. We're right around the 1-week anniversary of my first version of Siri, 30 years ago, before I ever saw a web browser. Just for, I know most of you don't remember a time before a web browser. That's when I had my first version of Siri. So just one quick lesson. If you're going to work on something as an entrepreneur, pick something that matters to you, because it might take a little longer than you thought. In this case, 17 years to get from first prototype to actually being useful to somebody. So moving forward quickly in the story, we went to Apple, we worked for 18 months, and then we launched the version that was embedded in the iPhone as part of the iPhone 4S, October 4th, 2011. And the very next day, Steve Jobs passed away. And his admin wrote to me and said, I've been meaning to tell you this for years. Steve was clinging to life to see the launch of Siri. That's how important it was for him. I like to think he's brought so much to the world, but Siri was really his last gift to the world. This was the advertising. I know it's hard to see on these small screens, but when Siri first came out, Siri, your wishes, its command. And it's funny, as we go through ChatGPT and all of the hype around that, it all feels so familiar. It really does. There's a lot of parallels. But the next 2 quarters for Apple were the best quarters in technology history. It broke every record in terms of profit margins, et cetera, and Apple passed Exxon to become the most valuable company in the world, and in fact, in the history of the world up until that time, just based on this feature called Siri. They were selling the iPhone 4S, which was literally the iPhone 4 plus Siri. So people often ask me, well, what was it like? What did it feel like when Siri came out? And here's a lesson that you can try with the startups you're doing right now. That lesson is, when you're working on a project, visualize success. Ask yourself, what would it look like if this really hit? What would it look like? And be bold. So here's my story. I remember we had just started the company. We were like 4 or 5 people. I walked into an Apple store, and there on the wall was apps. The iPhone had come out, App Store was just appearing, and there were apps of the biggest, most powerful companies in the world. Google, Skype, Pandora. These were companies with tens of thousands of people. And so, summoning up my biggest courage, I said, someday, Siri will be right there on the wall of an Apple store next to all the other big guys. I'm telling you, it seemed crazy and impossible. Fast forward a couple of years, the day Siri is coming out, of course, I have to go to an Apple store to see, are people buying this thing? What's the vibe like? And this is what I walked up to. As I approached the front door of the Apple store, they had a plasma display showing Siri running on a loop. And that image from years before of just wanting to be one icon out of 100, and now the front door said, introducing Siri, it gave me chills. And this has happened to me time and time again, other stories like this. But visualize success. Imagine, what would success look like? Take a snapshot in your mind, because later on, life might come back and say, remember that? Even better than you thought. So Siri was not the only endeavor I did. This is Ben Rattray. He's a genius, a product guy. And in 2006, we decided to collaborate on a project called Change.org. Now today, Change.org is the largest platform in the world for petitions, for getting social engagement around not only a problem, but a solution. We have, this slide is old. We have now more than 500 million members, so this is a way to actually get things done in your local community, your national community, internationally, et cetera. If you see something wrong, you start a petition and say, this is who I want to do this change, and here's why. And those 3 components, if people agree, will start to click. And in a few, you get a couple 100,000 clicks. That shines a spotlight, not only on a problem, but a solution, a proposed solution. And that brings usually reaction in some ways. Every hour, a petition turns into a victory, meaning someone's proposed change has actually happened. Now, in the beginning, it was not instant success like the Siri story. It also took time. So we did one thing well. We instrumented the data, every click, everything users did. We had an incredible dashboard that tracked everything. And we started iterating and iterating. We had discussions about topics. We had donations for every nonprofit in the US. We had a political aspect. One way to change the world is raise money and try to fund things, but another is to canvass politicians. So we had the first click-to-call, electronic click-to-call in 2007 to engage your community, to tell a politician, make it easy. We had this thing called Ideas for Change, and when Barack Obama ran in 2008, he wanted to listen to the world, to America, and we became a vehicle for that, and more, and celebrity change makers, social job boards, gifting platforms, and finally, petitions. So as we went through this process of iterating, and you see version after version of our website, we started simplifying and simplifying based on what the data told us, and we ended up with us very simple around the idea of petition, which is not where we started out, but that's how we got there, by following the data. If you look at our growth, 4 years, if we round up to the nearest million, we had 1 million. 4 years, 1 million, 1 million, 1 million, 1 million, but we stuck with it. We iterated, we tried again, we listened. Then we went 1 to 10, 10 to 25, 25 to 50, 50 to 100, 100 to 150, and as I said, we just hit 500 million members. So with my remaining 5 minutes, I want to tell you about my mentor. So first of all, I'm a huge believer in entrepreneurs. All of you in this room, you are what's going to create all the good that's going to come in the world. It always starts with one person with an idea who's committed to doing something important. So entrepreneurship is the greatest engine of change. So if you want to learn, where should you look to learn entrepreneurship from? I was lucky enough to spend years working with the greatest entrepreneur in history, according to me. And I'm going to tell you about him. So who, in your mind, could be the greatest entrepreneur? Well, the computer, the personal computer experience, that's a major contribution with the Windows and the GUI and the mouse. Well, who was that entrepreneur? Was it Steve Jobs, or maybe Bill Gates? One of those two, I'm sure, invented the personal computer. Well, that's pretty good, but what about the web with hyperlinks and distributed multimedia documents? That is the most important engine for entrepreneurship, not just the computer. Who invented that again? Oh yeah, was it Tim Berners-Lee? That must be it. Well, maybe it's social networks, harnessing collective intelligence. Mark Zuckerberg. Maybe it's collaborative tools like Zoom or Skype. Maybe it was the Skype guys who did the first real collaborative tools. Well, what if I told you that all of these things, the personal computer, Windows, emails, text editors, hyperlinks, multi-document collaborative editing, video conferencing, on and on and on, were all invented by one man? Would you believe me? It is true. This was all the work of one person named Doug Engelbart in the 60s, and he had more advanced systems than we have today. He built all of these and more. And you can look it up by typing into Google or your favorite search engine the magic words, the mother of all demos. He literally, in the 60s, at a time when everyone else was programming computers using punch cards, created the first interactive terminals with mouse, keyboard, web, hyperlinks, etc. But he didn't create this technology just for technology's sake. Doug was an innovator of extreme proportions. He said, someday, the world is going to be faced with complex, global, urgent problems. And he listed them. He said, if we cannot get better at solving problems together, we will not survive. He said the types of problems he cares about are pandemics, sound familiar? Climate change, hunger, poverty, water, food, pollution, war, and many more. He was creating technology to augment human intellect, to allow us to use the computer, the exponential power of the computer, to improve our ability to solve world problems. And he gave a blueprint for how to do this, not only through technology, but through collective IQ, a term that he coined. And so if you want to learn more, Google his name or type in the mother of all demos. If you don't know, you say, I want to be an entrepreneur, but I don't know yet what I should focus on. This was the challenge he left for all of us in this room. He said, I could pick any one problem, but if I could solve the meta problem, the problem of solving problems, that would be the biggest return on investment for my life. And he meant so much for me. I got to work with him for 15 years. It's my job to try to pass on some of this knowledge to you. Maybe it'll inspire you to go out and change the world. So I'm sure all of you are like, Siri, generative AI, you're the AI guy working 40 years in this space. Shouldn't you just say that AI will solve all our problems? Well, it's not. AI will be a tool to help, but we have to solve our own problems. So in conclusion, here are some of my greatest secrets. Siri means secrets. So verbally stated goals. Figure out what's core in your heart. Turn it into words. Tell people, I am going to achieve this, even if you have no idea how, because that commits you, and then people start to help you achieve that for you. Visualize success. Ask yourself, what would success look like if I achieved it? And take a mental snapshot, because it might come in handy later. Follow the data, instrument everything you do, and learn from it. And then if you don't know what to work on, there are problems out there, and I think the idea of focusing on the meta problem, helping humanity work better, is genius. So at a time when I was in my 40s and stuck and said, what can one person do? The one difference that I know now is, of course we can do it. What can one person do to change everything? An entrepreneur can change everything. You are all entrepreneurs. You can change everything. I'm so excited to see what you can do. Thank you.